Welcome to the Reinventing Education podcast. I'm Rob McLeod, joined as always by Brendan O'Leary. And today we are looking at staff professional development and evaluation, the evaluation of that PD from the lens of the three types of school, looking at the three fundamentally different approaches to school, the expert, the coach, and the counselor. How are you today, Brendan O'Leary?
I'm not too bad, Robert. It's been a little while since we did one of these, and I've been looking forward to getting back on the mic. Professionally, school year started really well in the sense that a lot of the coaching ideas that we've tried are starting to come to some sort of fruition. So I'm really pleased that a lot of things we've talked about in our healthy coach-centered school, I'm seeing. How about
Very nice.
yourself? Big changes for Robert.
Oh, not so big. No, it was just off all last year writing a book. And yeah, now assistant head of school and an MYP coordinator. Glad to finally be in an IB school after thinking about it, reading about it, talking about it so much for years, and really enjoying it. Lots of good people. Very, very, very full days. But I think that's the case when you start at a new school, and especially in a leadership role when you haven't worked your way up through the school as a teacher and climb the ranks. So there's always a million new things to learn when you enter a new school planet. I feel like every school is its own planet with its own gravity and laws of physics that you kind of have to learn. So
Its own space
really,
casino.
yeah, very space casino. Love the atmosphere of the school. It's a great place.
Right, beautiful. Well, what are we talking about today, Robert?
Well, if you had been listening, Brendan, we said staff professional development and evaluation. And
News to me.
the core idea of this is there's no one right way to do school. This is kind of our idea that there are like three fundamentally different and conflicting approaches to school, and each can be done well or poorly, and each of them have their own babies and bathwaters. So today we're going to do a quick look back at the expert and coach approach to PD, and then compare, contrast, juxtapose it with the counselor approach and look at the babies and bathwaters of the counselor approach. So to begin, let's look at professional development and see what it looks like in an expert-centered school. So in an expert-centered school, we talk about this being like a pyramid hierarchy, where there's concentrated authority at the top in terms of the school structure, usually just a handful of heads of school, and then a very clear distinction between what the heads do and what the teachers or the staff do. And this is also mirrored in the classroom, where teachers are given a lot of space to use their own professional judgment. So their own professional development mirrors this pyramid approach by kind of having your own space to do things. So the PD, you are an expert. You're the leader. You go off to the symposium, the workshop, the conferences, and then you bring the good things back. And you're kind of the expert from the PD that you did. You can become the mentor, say, on a specific topic that you've had training on. People can go to you. There's usually some kind of informal community sharing. Perhaps it's shared within a department, if you're with others, possibly at a staff meeting, but there's no like larger data-based, let's track our progress on this thing. It's kind of a like, I'm going to put this out there, and you as the other experts, the tops of your pyramids in your classrooms, decide what you do or do not take from this. But there's a lot of professional trust in you, and you're sharing as a professional. The outside PD, help me out with this one, Brennan. You're some deficit, or they've been amazed.
So often your boss might come round, take a look at how you're doing, and they might notice a deficit. They might notice there's something that you're missing, and it just so happens they know somebody or who's running a PD or can help you with that, and they send you off there. Conversely, they might have seen something absolutely amazing, and they want you to even take that further and like, yeah, this is an area that you could really be an expert's expert in. So let's get you some even more of that training. And that's one of the ways that, like, I guess if we look at that expert school, that might be a little bit more traditional in some ways, that might be the first way that professional development rears its head.
Yeah, this idea of either we're trying to catch you up to being able to do your responsibilities in full, or like you say, you are the expert's expert and we want people to come and see what you're doing. The other way in, we often talk about duty or requirement as being one of the organizing principles of expert schools. And that's the case here, where in some places, PD is just a requirement or a duty. There might be some policy that says you have to attend one workshop a year, or there's a requirement that, at least one person within a department has this specific training, and we just have to make sure that box is ticked, and it's your responsibility to go off and to do that. And connected to that, yeah, it could be from specifically the school board or an evaluation body. It's just one of those things where it's like, we need to see that this thing has happened. In terms of the evaluation of that PD, there are often some kind of like visit from the headmaster. And the frequency of this, I think it completely depends on the school. I would say in the expert leading schools that I've seen, it's much more often the case that it's like a one-time annual visit. And perhaps in like the maybe slightly unhealthy expert versions, although you could make a case for this being the healthy version as well, it's kind of like once you've proven you're meeting those responsibilities, we're off your back. And I've certainly heard examples of teachers who've had their one annual visit or one or two in the first year or two, and then went 15 years without anyone else being in their classroom ever again for any kind of an evaluative visit, at least internally. And you can see that's built on this idea of the expert's trust and giving you that professional judgment. You've proven yourself that you're meeting our expectations, you're being responsible, we don't need to micromanage you. Although I've seen the other as well, which is, that kind of head popping into the classrooms frequently, even unannounced, and it's just part of the norms and the culture that it's fine that they're there. So I'd say you can see both extremes, but I'd say it's more often the case that it's one or two evaluative visits, and then that's it. But at the end of the day, coming back to this professional discretion, the evaluation is at the discretion of the head. Everything from the frequency to the criteria. The head will probably even give themselves their own flexibility of perhaps not making every piece of these visits transparent. And that's not from any kind of a deception side, but rather just so they can exercise their own judgment. Perhaps that's in terms of the criteria that they're using or an evaluation visit template or something like that. It's up to their own expertise. And if they're in the classroom, they're seeing these kinds of, let's say, challenges or issues arise in the classroom, they would then decide on more visits, more drop-ins, and what that process would look like. And, the head or the person in charge who has that authority as the top of the school's pyramid would decide what that plan of action needs to look like. And at the worst case version of this is that eventually they ask you to leave, or perhaps you're fired because they're just saying you're just simply not meeting the expectations of what we do. And in the best version of this, it's been well documented. They've been in your class. You've had these discussions. This should not be a surprise. In the unhealthy version, it may be a surprise to someone because at the end of the day, it's largely left up to the discretion of the head.
Yeah, and so, we experience many of these things in our schools, because as we said, not every school, is a combination in some level of the more expert and the coach and the counselor-centered approach. If your school is leaning more expert towards the expert kind of paradigm, you may see more of these things. However, if you're working in a school that is trying to embody the coach approach, which we would see in a lot of our mainstream schools in England and the States and so on. Professional development is seen somewhat as an inherent good. The idea that there's a continuous training and growth of teachers, it's a long-term building of community, and often you see things like these PLCs, the professional learning communities, starting to emerge where maybe the same people have the same goal. Multiple people are on a similar professional development path. Again, in this coaching model, there would be some expectation. There would be the push for everybody to attend PD once or maybe multiple times in a year, and then to bring back what they've learned into the school so that it can transfer into the daily operations of the school. Often this can be organized on a school-wide level. Like I said, the PLCs, the professional learning communities, you may have a coach, you may be working with a peer, and often schools will have some sort of professional development plan tied into their action plans and strategic plans and program implementation of how they want the school to grow and develop over the next few years. And there may be some back and forth between the school's goals and the goals of the individual, but it's all negotiated. With the aim of growth, the idea is that we're going to grow each individual, and that will in turn grow us as a school. It will help us to be able to do our jobs better. We can support our students in a better way. And part of this is having measurable goals and strategies, which, as I said, could be more personal or they could be school or somewhere between the two. Yeah, so this is very much one of the things we see coming in this coaching model is the idea that we have goals, strategies. We're measuring them. We're transferring our knowledge in a very intentional way. Now, sometimes this could be done through external consultants as well. So you may become part of a larger plan. Especially when I was working back in England, we would often work with the school board, and they would send us on a series of professional development. For example, they introduced a new phonics program, and this was, of course, very much more to do with the school's goals rather than the individual's goals in this case. But it still obviously fit in with better teaching and learning. But the school centers on 4 or 5 trainings over the course of a year, with the aim of being able to better implement reading strategies in school. What will also happen really is that those goals and strategies will have been set out in some sort of meeting with either your coach or somebody in a leadership position, and not necessarily the head. We talked about in the expert paradigm, you would see maybe the head coming in a drop-in or once a year. This is much more the professional development, and how it is implemented in the classroom is much more about a negotiated set of goals and criteria, and that includes when your evaluator or your coach might come in to the classroom. In relation to that, there's a very clear budget. This is something that, as we said earlier, in the expert centered, you might just need to go on this professional development. The school might just find that money. Whereas in the coach centered approach, you have a specific budget. And if you need more, you can apply for it. But you have this budget, and the expectation is that you are going to use it wisely to develop yourself in line with the plan that you've created. If we move over to the evaluation side of this, so looking at how this professional development now is applied and transferred into your classroom. So again, your coach, when they're coming in, whoever they are, whether they're your head of department or a peer or a principal, when they come in, there is the shared criteria about what makes a good teacher and what they're looking for. It may be broad. You might be looking at multiple things, or it might maybe a very, very specific thing. And this might include you even videotaping sections of your lesson and things like that, so that you can definitely look at those specific elements that you are developing in. It's not a general approach of that we just all know implicitly what makes a good teacher. No, it's about having specific criteria that we can observe and measure. And it's not an end in itself. Evaluation, when the head or your coach comes in, it is not a box ticking exercise. It is not something we just need to do. And it's not just a way to check that you're doing the right thing. It is not an end in itself. It is a way to give you what we would call formative feedback. So we can look at what you're doing well, and we can then help you to celebrate what you're doing and then take those next steps to grow even further. As part of this, you would have meetings to review and reflect on what you've done as part of your professional development plan. It may also involve doing your own research and bringing that into these professional development plans, so that you can show your commitment in a bunch of ways to your development. Now, when it's all going well and good, those meetings will be, mostly a celebration and maybe looking at some small course correction over how to improve, or, a little bit of coaching feedback. When it isn't going as well, when your coach and even yourself is recognizing that this isn't going in the right direction, then we can move into the idea of support plans. This is, again, we go back to the expert level. If you are not doing something, you might be sent on a course, you might be given a little bit of coaching you might be given a little bit of kind of time with an expert to kind of get your level up. Whereas we move into the coaching paradigm, we're now saying, okay, well, you haven't met these specific standards. You haven't met your specific goals. So we're going to add an additional level of support. Maybe this means that there's more observations. Maybe it means that there's some modeling, team teaching with your coach, all in service of making sure that you do grow. And the evaluation should be meaningful in the sense that it is very clear that even if you don't have 100% say in all your goals, because some of these are school-wide goals that may or may not align perfectly with what you want to do on an individual level, the evaluation is still meaningful to you in the sense that it helps you grow. You can still see how in the school-wide approach and in your day-to-day teachings, you are improving in these areas. So it's markedly different, and as we said, it can be done well or it can be done badly. And when it's done well, it should feed into ongoing growth that has some purpose to you and to the organization. All sounds great, but as you move into the counselor-centered approach, some of those no longer are as good a fit for the model of a counselor-centered school. So, Robert, what would a really good version of professional development and evaluation look like in a counselor-centered school?
Oh, geez, I've got no idea.
All right, end
I
of the
wish I could
episode. See you
end of the
next time.
episode. So, expert and coach, to some degree, are two sides of the same coin, in that professional development is something that is done to you, in a sense. In the expert, you're either being asked to go do this, or it might be a requirement, a responsibility. It may be connected to your interests. It's likely connected to your department. You've got some autonomy around it. The coach, as Brennan was just explaining, it's a given. It's an inherent good. Of course, you'll be doing this. And the school will organize PLCs, and there will be either internal school goals matching, regional school goals, matching national school goals, all these sorts of things. The fundamental shift that changes here with the counselor is that PD isn't something done to you. And I'd say there are two parts to this. One is within the atmosphere or within the universe of a counselor school, you're learning from everything. Nothing isn't embedded in this pursuit of a co-created, meaning navigated environment in the school of the counselor. So everything is going to come out of the community and everything feeds back directly into the community. And it's not external forces or external expectations that are generating the need or the action on professional development, but rather it's the internal people within the school who are navigating finding meaning in relation to their context, in relation to their local, like within the school, as well as local in terms of their local community and in terms of their national or international community. So it's this ongoing dialogue of kind of unfolding what is most important to us. And then in relation to that, we would be deciding what skills do we need to develop, what other capacities need to grow here. And we often turn to Ivan Illich and the book Deschooling Society. And we should just have some kind of like 2-minute overview of this that we just insert to every episode whenever we get to this section. We've reviewed it in previous episodes, but in Deschooling Society, he talks about having this infrastructure or this network of resources and community. So having a peer group, being able to find someone to be kind of your counselor, kind of mentor to help you in your self-directed journey. And I guess that's the big piece here. The professional development is self-directed in relationship to the needs and meaning of the community as it connects to its larger context. So everything's completely meaningful. Meaning is at the center of it. And again, meaning is not just the personal meaning. It's the meaning within the person, within the community, within the larger context, at least when the counselor is being done in a healthy way. So the themes that are emerging, the needs of the community are then feedbacking to generate and create the individual sense of what do we need to develop here. So it's coming internally, not externally. And then within that, just like anything in the counselor school, everything's up for co-creation. So every element of the professional development, its length, the cost, all of these things are malleable, or maybe another way to say it is they can all be agreed upon and consented upon within the group. In terms of what you do with it, it could be shared equally after, or you could make the case that this is good for the community. This is a new direction we need to go. Perhaps it is true that just one person is taking a larger share of the funds for a specific training, but that would be consented upon ahead of time. And then there would be a plan moving forward in terms of what would be brought back to the group.
Yeah, I think the key thing here is that everything you're doing every day allows you to reflect on it and seek out a way to do it better. And as you said, with the earlier two kind of paradigms, the expert and the coach, there's an idea that it's separate and it's different from just your daily life, and it has to be somewhere you go to, or there has to be somebody leading it. One of the things I hear a lot in terms of leaning towards the counselor kind of school is that, our the knowledge we already have within our body of teachers or the people we know is actually probably way more useful than any one of us going out to just do an individual course. Now, it could be that the person who goes on the course gets something brand new that's not already in the air, but there's enough in within our, if you're working in a school with 5, 10, 50, 100 teachers, there's so much knowledge and so many things every single day that we are learning. That just finding ways to kind of feed that back into the community is going to have so many more chances for that professional development to happen, because everyone you're speaking to and everything you do is an opportunity. And then, like with the Illich idea, reaching out is part of it too, to be like, oh, well, actually, I do want to find a peer group, or I do want to find an expert who can help me in this, or I do need somebody who's going to coach me. And so, even though those experts and coaches are different kind of ways of schools to approach things, I might still, in my counselor centre school, want that for just a few here and there. It's not fully embedded. We're not actually, moving between those three types fluidly. I'm still mostly in my counselor centered approach, and I'm like, but what is it that's going to move me forward? There's just, I think, so much more of an emphasis on that reflection and whether it is actually moving us in the right direction. What is it that will move us forward? And it might be that I do want to go on a particular course with a particular person, but it might equally be that I need to read something or just rethink my plans personally, or go to see four different teachers in my school to see how they do it. And it's that deconstructing to a way of seeing how the professional development in the coach school could actually get in the way of a more meaningful professional development, because I'm on someone else's criteria, I'm on somebody else's budget, someone else's goals. Whereas as you get into the counselor centered approach, you're starting with the idea of, well, what is emerging now, what is needed right now and over the next 3, 6, 12 months that will help me and my group to move forward, my community to move forward. And then this idea of evaluation just becomes intrinsically tied into that, because it isn't something that's done to you once a year or even once every few weeks with your coach. It's like, no, that counselor is there and is also you. You're one of the counselors within the group, because everybody is counseling each other in the healthy version of this school. So that's happening all the time. So every professional development opportunity is transferred and reflected on. And some of them, those are big, kind of pivotal changes, something you've never seen before, never tried before. But many of them are going to be small tweaks to something you're already doing, trying something that you hope will move things in the right direction. The criteria then may be much more in the context of what you're doing, and less about you being able to set an external set of criteria 3 months ago or 6 months ago with somebody else. It might be like, well, I have to set my criteria as I'm doing this thing and work out whether it's working, and then maybe get other people to counsel me on that. What are they seeing? Being clear that the counselor doesn't just mean how we think and feel about something. The counselor is also talking about how things work in practice, and how the structure of it works, how the relationships are working. So yeah, it's just an ongoing path to development that has many, many more potential points than either of the two earlier, or either of the two paradigms we talked about earlier in the episode. Yeah. Anything to add there, Robert, or shall we move on to what's good about this method, this model?
Yeah, let's talk about what's good. What are the babies, or maybe even more than just what's good, what's new here.
Mm,
And I suppose when we look back on the expert and the coach, what is new here is that the professional development, the idea of what that is, and the actual practice of what we pursue to develop professionally is emerging from what is genuinely needed in the community. It's meaningful and connected both to the individual and the group level. To strawman the coach and the expert to some degree, we can say, yeah, the coach, the pursuit of professional development, sure, is meaningful to the individual within this very isolated section of the overlap of your professional or personal goals within the sphere of the schools, or within the sphere of this current initiative, or within this year's development plan, or within X, Y, and Z. It's not going to be divorced in any way from what the school is just working on anyways, regardless of who the people are in the school. And the experts similarly, it's just, hey, we need everyone to do X number of workshops this year. We need someone from these departments, or, I've told you that you're going to go do this because I saw, not such a good thing in your classroom. We're trying to fill up deficits, or, hey, you are the great person. I'm nominating you as the expert's expert to teach these other people. It's something that's being imposed, or is a responsibility or something to be marked that it's completed. Whereas here, it's only a topic if it's emerged from the community through community discussion, through the community finding consensus on what challenges do exist and what development is needed to accomplish those. So that's the new feature that this is bringing to the table that the previous two don't have. And of course, the expert in the coach school can be supportive of professional development. We can encourage people, we can track data, we can set goals, we can celebrate people, we can, acknowledge their contributions of professional development that they've had. But it's not, again, it's not in those two other approaches emerging from the group itself. And in this sense, everyone is supporting each other in their own growth on a personal, professional, and organizational level simultaneously. So I'd say those are the new things that are being brought to the table, and potential gifts. There's a lot of good that can come from those things. However, this show is all about mediating between these three approaches. And part of that mediation is acknowledging that it's not all good, and there are drawbacks, and there can be an unhealthy version of this. So Brenda, walk us through the dark side of this, Brenda.
I will indeed. I will indeed. The one of the things that will potentially trouble us is that as we move into that idea, as we said, if it's reflection based and the criteria might be set within the moment, it's contextual, you are potentially stepping away from those very clear goals and criteria that are set in the healthy coach approach. You are beginning to recognize that maybe those goals could get in the way of your development if you're adhering to something that's not perfectly fitting your context. The pushback to that would be that they're still emerging for the community, and goals should still be some sort of focus. But yeah, it could be that if you're looking from a coaching perspective, it's like this just looks like those goals are much less defined, and therefore, how would you know if you're making your progress towards those? And so you could see how a coach would see that. And I'd say on a expert, we may actually say, well, if you're constantly setting these mini goals and criteria while you're doing everything, you're just going to get overwhelmed because you're constantly trying to readjust. And it's like, so I could see how an expert would be, well, we do what our duty is, we do it right, we do the right thing. School's not an experiment. And then once a year, or once, twice a year, someone comes in just to check that you're doing the right thing. But as we've shown from the counsellor approach, there's a very, very different approach within a counsellor-centered school. Likewise, those goals potentially would be less informed by data if we are, kind of moving within the context and moving from one lesson to the next and seeing what's working and then reflecting. There's a danger for sure that it becomes more about whether it felt right, whether it felt like things were working. And did you collect any data on that to show that it actually was moving in the right direction. So the healthy approach would still factor in some way to check that this was working, but you could see how absolutely an unhealthy approach to this might just be like, well, this was my goal last week, and I sort of felt like I did a good job, so now I'm moving on to the next goal. It's yeah, there's a danger that we stop listening to each other, but then again, that would be an unhealthy version of this because the idea is that you're getting more feedback this way, more voices that are helping you to decide and reflect. Likewise, we get into the idea that because this is much more personal and emergent from what is needed, there's no longer a long-term whole school plan that can be adhered to, and that could very much be that could make a lot of people nervous, especially if you are in a coaching centered school that were there were these big goals and there were, timelines and milestones, and we were checking that we were moving in this right direction. And suddenly you're like, well, we've all got many goals and everybody's working with each other on it. It'd be like I could see how a someone would be like, well, that's just going to become chaos. It's going to become a total mess, and you're never going to make your any growth forward because it's such a mess. Again, we can push back, and I think if you look back at the positives of this, the answers as to why that wouldn't happen in a positive version of this counselor school makes sense because we have all those checks and balances every single day of somebody giving you feedback and actually checking whether it's meaningfully moving the community forward. But I can definitely see in an unhealthy approach that it could actually be chaotic, but at the very least be seen as chaotic from somebody who's in an expert or coach centered school.
So all three of these do professional development, but what and how that professional development looks is dramatically, I hope it appears dramatically different to you, the listener, after having heard us go through in granulated detail the nuts and bolts of each of these.
Yeah, and what's interesting, we often finish on the bathwater, which is a little bit of a negative point, but it's hopefully showing that, yeah, all of these approaches can be done well and they can be done badly, and we just have to be very aware if it's a good fit for our community and what we are trying to achieve. And be aware of when we are straying into the negative version of the thing we are trying to achieve. It doesn't mean we're in the wrong kind of paradigm. If you are in a coach-centered school, you might be in the right place. You might not be embodying the healthiest version of that. So it's always a case of, and I think this comes up very much in your book, Robert, that knowing the type of school you want to be and knowing whether you're embodying the healthy version is the key.
Exactly. Genau. Thanks, Brendan.
Thanks, Robert.